All right, what's up? Welcome in. It is GC Live, Thursday episode of the show, your official South Carolina versus Kentucky preview show here on GC Live. As we've been trying to let everybody know, from now on, Thursday preview, that's it. No Friday podcast most weeks unless just something crazy happens and we have to hop on and talk about it. So this will serve as our final preview for Gamecocks versus Kentucky. Also going to be joined by KSR's Nick Roush here in about 13 minutes or so, and going to get the Kentucky perspective on this South Carolina versus Kentucky matchup as both teams open up SEC play in Lexington this weekend. But first, let us tell you about our good friend Clint Hammond, ClintHammond.com. Clint is, of course, working now with CMG Home Loans. Phone number 803-422-6797. NMLS number 71597. And, of course, like we always tell you, if you're in the market to buy a home and you need a mortgage, Clint is your guy, whether you're in the Midlands, whether you're somewhere else in the state of South Carolina, and even in some other states. If you want to support a Gamecock and let him take care of you just like he did me and my wife when we bought our home, Clint is your guy, 803-422-6797. Chris, man, we're in it now. We're in the thick of it. You wait all season long, or you wait all off season long, and then the season gets here, and we are off and rolling. Old Dominion is put to bed. Kentucky is right around the corner. And frankly, this Gamecock team, man, let's not sugarcoat it. They do have a tough task ahead, I think, with this Kentucky team they're going to face.
They do. This is a game, Wes, that I think Kentucky and South Carolina both circled going into the year. That is still the case. This is still a very important game for both teams. We'll ask Nick for the kind of the Kentucky perspective. He knows it better than I do. Let me give my read, though, okay? After week one for both of these teams, the sense I get is that Kentucky, and probably not just because they beat Southern Miss in a short game 31-0, Kentucky's preference, and I think what they're doing is saying, as a fan base, South Carolina, no, we've got other fish to fry. Like, we've got bigger goals this year. Now, in my opinion, they should not overlook this game. It's still a very important game. Wes, think about the difference in Lexington between losing this game, oh boy, will they be ticked, or winning it, and then you're probably building some confidence saying, hey, we feel pretty good going in. For South Carolina, I think this game has gotten even more important than originally thought going into the year. And a lot of that does have to do with how you looked week one. If you come out week one, beat Old Dominion, 41-13, you look pretty good, not even firing on all cylinders, but look good. I think people are still going, this is an important game, but hey, we'll see what happens the rest of the season, right? I think the way that South Carolina looked in week one against Old Dominion has, just to be honest, quite frankly, it has kind of diminished the opinion of this team a little bit. This game is going to go a long way towards saying, hey, it was a game one aberration, or, okay, this team's on track. They can go be competitive against the rest of the SEC. So for the Gamecocks, man, if you don't get this one, you do start doing that thing we do where you go up and down the schedule and say, look at this thing. It's going to be tough sledding the rest of the way.
Well, you're going to have to see aggressive improvement. Like I think, as we've said ever since the Old Dominion game, I think there's a ton of room for improvement, and I don't just mean that like, oh, they played poorly on offense. I mean that in terms of you can realistically expect an improvement on this offense when you look at the fact you do have a young quarterback, look at the fact you have a lot of new receivers. Really, if you want to talk about the one spot on this team that you can like accurately say, yes, they are young, you would say is sort of in the passing game when you're talking about quarterback and the fact that two of your three starting receivers at this point are basically a true freshman in Mazio and then a redshirt freshman in Dre Jacobs at receiver and, of course, Lenoris at quarterback. So, again, I don't think it's a young team. I think it's a new team, but it is pretty young in terms of QB and receivers. Then you look at the rest of the receivers, other than, Nick Harbor, most of the rest of the guys playing, they're transfers in, and Delvon wasn't here until summer, basically. So I do think it is fair to think, hey, there's plenty of upside here to go. I think the question is, how quickly can they get there? Like how much of last week was game one type stuff, game one sloppiness? I think, me personally, I would feel a good bit better about them taking another jump this weekend if we had just seen a few more like flashes of what we thought we might see. Like here was my expectation. The more we sort of heard, the more I processed it going in. And I think I even said there will be times the offense will be disjointed going into this game. I firmly believe there were going to be moments where like the message boards are like, what was that? And it's just
right.
You never expect to see your team, or you never want to see your team poorly executing, but it happens. And it certainly happens in a game one. Certainly happens in a game one where you're getting a bunch of new pieces together. But I also thought we would see more of those flashes where you're going, oh, that's what it could look like. That's what it's going to look like. Did we see a couple of those? Were there a couple of times where maybe Rocket got loose and you were like, there he is? Were there a couple of times where Rocket made something out of nothing and you were like, okay, this guy is still special? There were. I thought, honestly, Chris, late in the game, I think it was kind of late third quarter, there's a play where Lenorse dropped back, didn't really see it necessarily the way he wanted, or there was a rush at first. He steps up in the pocket, looks like he's about to go run, keeps his eyes downfield, and sees Jacobs, 20 yards downfield, and just flicks it to him. Like, perfect vision, good throw. He catches it. He gets tripped up, or he's housing it. Like, I think it was a 40-yard gain anyway. I thought we might see a few more of those plays where Sellers is just keeping his eyes downfield. He's extending a play. He's making something happen. I thought we might see another explosive run or two in the game. That just has not quite happened yet. If you're Carolina, you're going to need for these guys to grow up quick. And I don't know how fair that is. Like, we're going to find out. Like, it is going to be tough to play at Kentucky. This is a budding rivalry in a lot of ways. Like, Kentucky fans care about this game, not just because they know they need the win, but the whole sunglasses thing, we dislike Beamer for no reason whatsoever. If we're Kentucky fans, that's a real thing. They're going to have their bourbon flowing. They're going to be fired up. And you got a young quarterback there if you're South Carolina.
I like your point to going back to the ODU game, man, about just the lack of explosiveness for South Carolina. And that came up in the presser yesterday on Wednesday with Dowell Loggins. And I want to say, Wes, 7 explosive plays for the game. No long rocket run. He had some very nice runs given the circumstances. The Jacobs play was the most explosive passing play. It's 41 yards. Some of that was after the catch. But you're right. We didn't see that disjointment like intermingled with like a bunch of explosive plays. I think you would have felt better if that would have happened. Kind of once again, you came away with Dowell Loggins mentioned this term yesterday, Wes, in the Wednesday presser, JV sacks, meaning some sacks that it's not like you're getting, this is the way I took it. You're not getting physically beat. You're getting mentally beat. You're not in the right place. And that is a concern, especially when you think about, okay, hey, we can correct that, but hey, we got to go correct it on the road in Lexington against a really active defensive front, against a guy like Deion Walker at defensive tackle, their mammoth guy up front there. I mean, it is going to be a tall order. And so where I tend to land is there's some of the issues that we saw in game one, I do think are going to linger maybe into this game, maybe for the rest of the year. Are there some things that we'll look back on this Kentucky game, win or loss, and say, okay, they grew in this area? I do think so. The question is, how much of it can you improve? How quickly, obviously, against Kentucky?
Yeah, no doubt. And we're going to learn quite a bit about both teams, I think, going into this game. Michael says, guys, the Gamecocks are bigger and stronger at every position. I just can't agree with that. Like, I think we got, and I'm not saying South Carolina cannot win the game. I've seen enough. Even go back to those Spurrier years, man. How many of those Gamecock teams looked awful in week one and just kind of found a way and were able to get in there and actually, Chris, you want to talk about that for a second? We're trying to get Nick on here. He just messaged me. I need to get back to him. But game one does not always mean that's what you are.
Yeah, that is very true. Well, and that's a point that we bring up a lot. Spurrier, I mean, really, there have been teams across the spectrum of Gamecock football. And honestly, us being in this bubble here, it probably extends out to a bunch of other teams. If you've got a team that wins 7 games a year, 8 games a year, 9 games a year, what that typically means is they have games where they look really bad, and then they have games that they win and they look pretty good, right? If you're not going undefeated or close to it, you're kind of up and down because of the margins that this game and in the SEC, which is even harder this year in 2024, with the teams that are coming in, plus the teams that have been here, all look better. We talked about that last week. I mean, heck, Vanderbilt looked pretty darn good in week one. But you're going to have some ups and downs. I think one of the concerns is you look at this team and you say, well, which things can get better? Can the receiving core take that big of a step up between now, game 2, game 10, whatever it may be? And in the past, there have been times where you feel like South Carolina is underperforming relative to the personnel that they have. Do they have it this year at some key spots? That's another question that we have.
No doubt. All right, so let's bring in Nick from KSR. Nick, we appreciate you taking the time today, man. I know you got a lot going on. How's it going in Lexington?
It's going well. I hope the weather cooperates better than it did in week one. We haven't had weather delays very often, so waiting till 10 p.m. to start a football game, it wasn't ideal. But Kentucky did play well in the small sample size. You didn't get to see as much run from some of the younger players in the second half, but once the engine got rolling, they played pretty well after those first 2 series.
Yeah, I went back and watched the game, man. I thought for a game one for Kentucky and all the just disjointedness in terms of stopping, starting, they executed pretty well on all phases of the game. It felt like just from my end. But I know we've got you for an abbreviated time here, so let's dive in. Other than pace of play, I know they're going to be much quicker in terms of trying to get in more snaps, more reps. What can you tell us about this new offensive scheme and maybe how it's a little bit different than what Kentucky's tried to do the last few years, Nick?
Well, I think the biggest difference is in the run game. You didn't have the quarterback run game available with Devin Leary, and Brock Vandegrift certainly bringing that. The Georgia players told us he's not a slider, and Brock confirmed that in his debut. He took quite a few shots early on. And then the other part of it is they just don't have a guaranteed bell cow back, where you've seen Benny Snell, Chris Rodriguez, Ray Davis last year, guys who take a lion's share of the carries and carry a heavy load. We were expecting Ohio State transfer Chip Trainum to most likely fill that role, and then he broke his hand about halfway through training camp. So he's out Saturday. He'll probably be out for another week or two. And so they're having to run back committee, which last week meant that Brock Vandegrift had 5 carries. I think the receivers had 5 carries. And then the running backs, all 3 of them, they've got 2 freshmen and NC State transfer and Demi Sumo-Karmbe, who combined for, I want to say, 9. So that's a lot different in that you're not just going to feed it to one guy up the middle, run a lot of inside zone stuff. They're using jet sweeps and the pitch passes to try to attack the edges to soften up the middle. But the other stuff, you probably won't notice it, those changes, where it's the verbiage is a little bit simpler. And I think Bush Hampton is much more – the way he communicates to his players, it's not you don't have to know the entire offense. Just know your job, do it. I'll set you up for success. Whereas Cohen, if you were going to play for him, you had to know everything. And I think that made them play a little bit slower. So the Cats were pretty crisp once they kind of got into a flow and a rhythm on Saturday. And I really like what I saw. They were able to connect on a few deep shots with Jamori Macklin, a North Texas transfer. He looked really good in that capacity. So, and I think the biggest thing that you'll see Saturday going up against the edge rushers from South Carolina is they're going to do a lot to try to move Brock around in the pocket. He looks more comfortable when he's on the move, when he's rolling out off of play action than he does in the straight drop back pass. So I think that's part of the reason how they're going to try to attack those edges and protect Brock, because if there was one thing I came away with particularly concerned, it was the amount of pass rush that was able to kind of put pressure on Vandegrift in week 1.
Nick, tell us a little bit about this Kentucky defense. In some ways, I feel like we could say very similar things every year. They're big, they're long, they're physical.
Mm-hmm.
They play hard. But what do we need to know about the defense this year in terms of their identity? Maybe anything that's different from what we're accustomed to, if anything.
The biggest difference from 23 to 24 is how they'll attack you on third down. Last year, they had pretty much an entire new secondary. There were some safeties that had minimal experience, but really their first time being full-time starters. And then the cornerbacks didn't have any experience. Maxwell Harrison emerged as an all-SEC type player. And because they have more experience there, they're a little bit more comfortable saying, hey, go out and play out on an island on third down. Man up, and we'll bring some pressure. That was the biggest weakness to Kentucky's defense last year. They were just so bad on third downs. They were 12th in the league, I think 109th in FBS in third down defense. They just couldn't get off the field. And so after the second drive, they gave up a 3rd and long on a blown coverage, and they gave up another 3rd and 8. They didn't give up another 3rd down the rest of the game. So where their strength is, though, and it's why I think Kentucky has an advantage against South Carolina, is it's in the run game. I mean, everybody knows about number 0, Deion Walker, but that is a big, stout defensive line. And more importantly, the linebackers have a ton of experience. They're instinctual. They're fast flying to the football. Pop Dumas Johnson, he was All-American for Georgia a couple of years ago. De'Aaron Jackson's really good at stopping the run. And even the guys behind him, when they came into the game, the backups, David Rayner had a pass breakup on a 3rd down, and Alex Afari moved from nickel inside. He bulked up, and he had a couple tackles for loss. So this linebacker unit might be the strength, especially against the run, which I think is really going to make it challenging for Dow Loggins to try to generate any sort of offense for the Gamecocks on Saturday.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Obviously, it's the Carolina offense that's built very differently than the one last year with Rattler and Luedecke and those guys. Nick, what's the vibe in Lexington right now? I'm sure most fans were pretty happy with the win last week, and I know Carolina fans have circled this game. I imagine Kentucky fans have circled this game a little bit. It feels like it's a rivalry almost. It's budded out of nowhere the last few years. Are Kentucky fans smelling blood in the water a little bit after Carolina's narrow win? And how much bourbon tasting will there be for this fan base before this one? Like, are they going to be good and jazzed up for this one?
Well, you saw the fans, despite the delay, it was lightning around the area. It wasn't rain. So they stayed in there. They got rowdy. They were ready to see their team. They're going to be even more fired up because, like the head coach, they do not like Shane Beamer. The whole sunglass thing that happened a couple of years ago, that's left a bad taste in their mouth. And it's kind of funny because for years, I got the sense from South Carolina fans, they couldn't believe that they were losing to Kentucky. Cats won 7 of 8. Now the Cats have lost 2 in a row to the Cocks, and they're like, how are we losing to Shane freaking Beamer? This dork who goes on every podcast in the world, we cannot lose to this guy. And so there's a good amount of pressure, I think, packed into this game. But Mark Stoops, he's had his teams geared up in SEC openers. Last year against Florida, that place was packed. That place was on fire. And then Ray Davis went and ran for 280 yards. I want to say that they've won 5 straight SEC openers outside of the COVID year. So they'll be ready to play, and they're expecting to win. I mean, if you want to get where you need to go, you got to beat South Carolina. There's no way around it. And a lot of it, I think, is going to come down to how good can this offense be? It looked sharp. They tended to answer some questions in that Southern Miss game, but the South Carolina front is significantly better. How is Kentucky going to be able to score points? Can Brock Vandegrift, can he be the guy we think he is? That's the big question that needs to be answered Saturday afternoon at Kroger Field.
Nick, real quick on special teams, I saw Southern Miss made kind of an ill-advised decision to go for a fake punt right at the end of the first half that Kentucky stopped pretty easily and then converted that into another touchdown. But, that aside, tell us about the kicking game for Kentucky. South Carolina has their punter back, Kai Kroger. They're breaking in a new kicker. If this is a close game, maybe that factors in. What's the kicking game look like?
Alex Rayner, the place kicker, was brought in from Georgia Southern a year ago, and he only missed one kick, and I think it was blocked. I mean, he's been a steady Eddie, Mr. Consistency. And then if they got to go long, the freshman they brought in to eventually replace him from Montana, he made multiple 60-yarders in fall camp. So they've got a big leg guy if they feel they need to go to him. The return unit, I mean, just you can't kick to Barry and Brown, and Southern Miss, they try to pooch kick to stay away from him. And a freshman tight end took the ball 20 yards and started it on midfield. So really the only question mark is at punter, where Wilson Berry struggled a year ago. They brought in a new punter who has a bigger leg, but Mark Stoops liked the consistency of Berry a little bit more. So that would be, I think, the shakiest part of special teams is in the punting game. But outside of that, they're pretty darn good. I mean, they were kicking the ball out of the end zone. When they didn't, it was getting tackled inside the 25. So I would consider special teams a strength of Kentucky's, especially if the ball somehow gets in Barry and Brown's hands, because 1 out of every 8 returns in his Kentucky career has been a touchdown.
Okay, that's a pretty good stat. Nick, we're gonna let you get out of here, man, real quick before you go. Give us maybe a key or two to victory in terms of like a couple things that you think could maybe just shape how this game plays out.
One of them is going to be incredibly boring, and we could say it every single Thursday, Friday, and that's take care of the football. Over the last 3 meetings, Kentucky's -6 in the turnover battle. In Kentucky's last win, they were in South Carolina territory a ton and just kept fumbling the ball over. Last season, Dane Key gets stripped. When he gets into scoring territory, Kentucky's got a chance to go either tie or take the lead with less than 2 minutes to play, and Devin Leary gets stripped from behind. So taking care of the ball is paramount, especially when I think your defense got an advantage like they will against the South Carolina run game. You can't give them short fields. You just can't do that. So turnovers, that's the boring answer. But the other part of it is how well does Kentucky Brock Vandagriff? Does he have time to get the ball off, or are Stewart and Kennard, are they going to create a bunch of havoc in the backfield? That to me is the story of the game. If Vandagriff's got time to find his receivers, I think they'll be able to move the ball. Those are the 2 big things that I'm going to be looking for Saturday. But ultimately, if you want a prediction from me, I do think Kentucky gets the win, something like 24-10, 24-14, something like that.
Hey, Nick, we appreciate the time as always, man. We'll let you get back to it, but enjoy the game Saturday. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
Appreciate y'all having me on.
Thanks, Nick.
Roush, go check out everything they got going on at KSR if you want the Kentucky side of everything, and KSR Plus over there as well. Chris, I tell you what, this is a great break in the action. I was about to move us on along, but do you want to tell everybody about our newest sponsor, Brad, and the Legion Investigative Group?
Yeah, it was funny, man. We were talking earlier today about Clayton White saying that he was doing some investigation into the Kentucky offense, Bush Hampton, where he's been in the past. Wes, you conducted an investigation as well and said, look, this looks a lot like the Missouri offense where Bush Hampton has been in the past. So I don't know if you need to do any investigation on football matters. If you do, I mean, our guy, Brad Moore at Legion Investigative Group, like Clint Hammond with mortgages, he will also talk some Gamecocks with you because he's a Gamecock guy. He's a Gamecock Central guy. Legion Investigative Group, that's legioninvgroup.com. Go to their website, check them out. Check out our guy, Brad. He can do so much for you. He has decades of expertise investigating, interviewing, surveillance. He takes on a small number of cases to make sure that the clients get their issues, take care of the issues that they need taken care of. Veteran-owned, veteran-run business. Again, a South Carolina guy. Could do so many different things for you. Again, whether it's security, investigations, process serving, he can handle it for you. One really cool thing, Wes, that Brad can take care of is if you are worried about ID theft. There are a lot of services out there that purport to help you with ID theft. A lot of it is kind of after the fact, right? Hey, my identity got stolen. This is bad. What do I do? Certainly, there's a lot to clean up there. But the cool thing Brad can do for you is he can help you get out in front of that and help you protect your identity from the jump so that the odds of it happening are a lot lower. So again, legioninvgroup.com or 770-235-7676. And Wes, I'm actually going to drop the website into our chat. How about that? Go check out Brad Moore, Legion Investigative Group, see what he can do for you.
No doubt, man. All right, so let's move it along. What did we just learn about the Kentucky perspective from Nick, Chris?
Well, it was reiterated that Kentucky does not like Shane Beamer for some reason. I like how you put it, like just like an almost how did you put it? Illogical.
Oh, I never know what I actually say.
No, no reason. You said it for no reason. They started it. He just finished it. And
the sunglasses thing, that had nothing to do with Kentucky. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know. It's funny, but it is. I mean, it is a. I feel like it is. It is definitely a rivalry, but both programs are like, why is this a rivalry? It shouldn't be. We should have passed this school a long time ago, and both of them have had their turns. I mean, I did agree with Nick. Like, there was a time where South Carolina was like, we should never lose to Kentucky. Then you lose 7 of 8, and then now it's kind of flipped. So look, this is a real important game, and for both sides, I laid that out earlier. Not maybe many surprises in what Nick said, but just combining what he said with what we've been talking about, Wes. The offensive lines for both teams, very important. I did notice exactly what he did. Brock Vandegrift is a mobile quarterback. Lenora Sellers is a mobile quarterback. Both teams had some issues in pass protection in game one. South Carolina, I think a lot of them were like picking up twists, mental things. Kentucky, they had some issues with the same things. They had some guys that got beat one-on-one. So when you start thinking about Kyle Kennard, Dylan Stewart, some of these defensive tackles, linebackers on the blitz, can you really affect Brock Vandegrift, who has been around the game a while, but is still a relatively young player himself in terms of actual experience? I think both these offensive lines are going to be key. And I still really think this is a defensive battle, at the end of the day. I can't see tons and tons of points being scored in this game.
Yeah, it always, even when you think, hey, this might be a little bit higher scoring than some recent games between these two teams, it almost always seems to just be a rock fight. And, you look at 2 years ago, Carolina actually put up some points early on, but a lot of it was spurred by defense and special teams. So I think if you see the point total get high, it probably has to be because there's been a pick six or a return or a block kick or something like that to sort of, I would say, artificially inflate the number that does not involve your offense. Now, I think if you're South Carolina, you got to find a way to create more explosive plays in this thing. I know that's easy to say, hard to do. If you're Kentucky, do you get a calm and comfortable Vandegrift in the pocket? Or can those guys we're talking about make him think a little bit more in there and process a little bit? I think that's going to tell us a lot early on. Maybe, Dylan was fantastic. How, does he make his first career start this weekend? I think we all know he's going to play a lot, but the step up to the SEC level, we know he is super talented. Like he probably already on one game of film is being projected as a first round pick. But to what extent can we expect him to just dominate a game as a true freshman against an SEC opponent? Like, is he that guy already that they're just going to have to start preparing for? I think will be the fascinating thing to see. Or is it more non-video game-esque, which is what I would call what he did this past week. Like, it was just it was ridiculous. So that'll be fun to see. That'll be interesting to see. Chris, if I'm South Carolina, if I'm Dow Loggins, I think you have to come out and throw the football early.
Yes.
Like, I think this is one of those games where you have to be almost counterintuitive to what you think on paper you would need to do. And I'd throw the ball 10 times in a row to start the game. I really would. Like, I would just come out shorter, easier passes if you can find them. Throw on first down, throw on second down. Break your tendencies. I know we're one game in. We're already talking about tendencies. But you know if you're going to win this game, you're going to have to establish the run. But the best way you're going to be able to do that in this game is to establish that you can throw the football. So or if I'm running the ball, I'm not calling an inside zone in the first 2 drives of the game. Like, call everything but what I actually want to do. Take a page out of their playbook. Let's get some guys on the edge. Let's get, if Jared Brown really is healthy, it appears he is. Let's get him going in the jet sweep, harboring the jet sweep. Get guys to the outside, get guys to the edge. I would almost throw the kitchen sink at them the first couple of drives in terms of just showing them a bunch of different looks, knowing ultimately I want to get them backed off so that I can come back to getting Rocket the ball. But I think just getting Rocket the ball early on is probably not a great recipe.
Yeah, and look, I mean, Loggins talked about it at his presser. We talked about it after the game. Carolina's going to have more downfield passing success. Because I would go even a step further with what you're saying, Wes. Yes, you want to get Lenora Sellers some easy access throws, but Kentucky going into this game is saying, they play zone a lot, but they play physical tight zone. They're probably saying, make this quarterback throw the ball down the field, stack the box. Don't let him run. Don't let Rocket Sanders run. If they throw some balls over our head, so be it. Because, frankly, South Carolina didn't throw a ball over Old Dominion's head. I mean, even the one you mentioned to Jacobs is kind of a little bit more of like a corner route, and he keeps going. He made a guy miss, almost took it to the house. But they're not out there just throwing darts all over the place in game 1. So they're seeing everything we're seeing, and Kentucky's coaching staff knows a lot more about football. So they're going to key in on those things as well. I do agree with you in that you probably are going to have to come out and try to establish the passing game, the threat of a passing game early. It seems very difficult. It seems like a very difficult path to think that you can just line up and run the football up and down the field on Kentucky. If it works out that way, then this team has taken a huge leap. That would be an outstanding omen for the rest of the season. I think they're going to need to do some of both and to have at least a semblance of balance in this game. So that's obviously a big question mark, right, as to whether or not they can do that.
Yeah, I think when Carolina's on the script, so to speak, they need to have some success on this thing early on, because I think that will just – and I don't even care what that looks like. I don't know – like, the coaches know way more about what areas of this thing can you exploit, where should you attack, all those things. But whatever it is, I think you need to kind of be aggressive early on, get the ball around to a bunch of different guys, and then come back to – and it'll be interesting to see, can they throw the ball down the field? Like, I know a lot of what Kentucky is going to do. I feel like Lenore's is going to have to make some of those intermediate throws, because when they're dropping into that zone, if they're sitting back, cover 3, cover 4, stuff like that, it's going to be, we're not going to let you throw it over the top. So can Lenore's hit those seam throws, those sort of throws where guys have to just settle in beneath, like in between those zones? It takes some precision, honestly, from your route runners and from your quarterback, and knowing where those holes are going to be. I think that's what makes Kentucky's defense difficult, is because they're not playing exotic coverages, but they just major in it a lot of times. So they know, like, this is what we do if you're Kentucky, and they're recruited for this. Like, they have the length to kind of shut down those windows very, very quickly, and they're not scared to hit you. So I also think the fact that Nick thought their linebackers are maybe a strength over their defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
You got to get those guys running sideline to sideline. Like, you got to, that's why I also think, maybe we're not throwing the ball 10 times in a row if I'm calling this thing, but we're putting some stuff out there early on to where when they go over there to that iPad after the first 2 drives, they're saying they just gave us 8 different looks in the first 10 plays of the game,
Yeah. Yeah. South Carolina's going to have to show some things and do some things that they did not in the first game. I mean, which is a reason if you're kind of going into this game a little bit more pessimistic, I understand, because you're saying, hey, you got to be able to throw the football. South Carolina didn't do that very well in game 1 against a lesser opponent. And you got to be able to protect the passer. Again, same thing. Kentucky's going to throw some stuff at you. They got a good D-line. They have linebackers that are really good against the run, but also very active, very physical, rushing the passer as well. And in the perimeter game, they're big, long, they can run. You do want to get their linebackers and their defensive linemen running side to side and get them tired out and stay on the field. But in order to do that, as an offensive coordinator, you're not going to feel good. Let's throw the ball sideways. Let's throw perimeter throws. Let's run to the perimeter if you're not blocking well. So that's another area where you got to take a big, big jump from week 1 to week 2 blocking on the perimeter. It's interesting because this team needs to probably use the word major. South Carolina needs to major in Rocket Sanders running the football. But until they establish more balance, it's going to be hard to do that, to get back to that base of running Rocket and that being the main part of your offense. Because right now, from what we saw in game 1, the feel is that this is a one-dimensional team. So can you break that mold and show more balance, the ability to do both in this game?
Let's go to the other side, man. Carolina defense, Kentucky offense. Nick sort of did make one of the points we've been saying. Hey, there's not this dominant running back, and they have some good running backs. They just don't have, they had a stretch there where it's like elite guy after elite guy, or at least very, very good to great guy after very, very good to great guy. Now they're a little bit more down to earth, like, all right, this is a good SEC running back, decent SEC running back, not that just game changer guy at running back. On the other hand, they have started to add better weapons at wide receiver. I think this is the best maybe trio of receivers, at least on paper, that they have had. And like he also talked about, they're getting them the football in various ways. It's not just go run a route. They're attacking the edges on you. So Carolina defensively last year, I think with last year's defense, that would be a big problem. Now, with the reinforcements you have, when Kentucky tries to get to the edge, I think that's a game within the game thing that I'm going to be watching, that you should be watching at home. When they run these little jet sweeps, when they run stretch zone to the outside with the running back, when they're doing these things where they're trying to get to the edge and attack the edges of your defense, are you seeing South Carolina's linebackers be able to flow to the football and cut off those angles? Are you seeing the Kyle Kennards, who one of the interesting things I was told about him when he committed to Carolina was, hey, this guy's going to be the best edge setter on Carolina's defense the moment he arrives on campus. He's not just a pass rusher. He can hold up in the run game. So if they are running to his side, whoever is sort of that force defender, are they able to, from a speed standpoint or a force standpoint, set the edge and put yourself in a position to where that speed does not become a factor outside? I think we know this is a faster, more athletic defense than it was last year. Now we get to find out, is it fast enough? Is it athletic enough against a team that we do still have a very small sample size? but against a team we know is going to try to attack some of those areas against you. And then I think that's where they're going to try to attack you down the field after they've sort of maybe softened you up a little bit by going sideline to sideline.
Yeah, we were talking earlier today, Wes, about how we would have felt better about South Carolina's offense after game one even if they had some of the struggles that they had, if they had mixed in some moments of brilliance, some explosive plays, some explosive scoring plays. The defense for South Carolina in game one generally did a lot of what they were supposed to do, right? They did a good job stopping the run overall. They played a good overall game. They got turnovers. They got the offense the ball back in very advantageous spots. Their problem was they gave up 2 explosive plays for touchdowns. Well, those are, I don't want to say easy, but those are more correctable than systemic problems that are, you're seeing for an entire drive, an entire game. You could look very quickly at what happened on those plays, see it, and you can correct it to where, I'm not saying it won't happen again, but, more correctable overall, individual little things here and there. The reason I say that is I like the matchup actually of South Carolina's defense against Kentucky's offense. It will be more of a challenge than Old Dominion. I do like it. At the same time, you don't like the matchup of South Carolina's offense, in my opinion, against Kentucky's defense. I think both defenses have the advantage in this game. So I think points are at a premium, special teams, turnovers, big explosive plays. If you're Carolina, can you prevent those explosive plays? Can you not do the thing where you play solid defense with all those setup plays that you're describing, and then you lose a guy on a play or a trick play or a throwback where they're making one explosive play that's going to be the difference in the game with a big score. So it's fascinating to think about. I do think it's a dangerous receiving core for Kentucky. I still like some of their backs. And Vandegrift's a very good runner of the football. I did see some leakage up front for them to where I feel like Carolina can make some things happen, stopping the run, and make some things happen, pressuring Vandegrift if they get in those situations. But how much can they do?
For sure. Mike, who I'm assuming is a Kentucky fan, says Carolina's had to play. This will be the first year Carolina's had to play against Kentucky's starting quarterback for the first time in 3 years. That is something that seems to be forgotten. Was Devin Leary not y'all's starting quarterback last year, Mike?
He was.
He was. Okay.
Yeah.
He threw 34 passes in the game last year. So he was there. He was on the field. I don't know what game you were watching. But, all right, let's get down to it. Final keys to victory here, Chris. Then we'll give maybe a prediction. But I do think Nick had a good point. Turnovers. And if this is a rock fight, if this is a game kind of like we've seen from these teams over the last sort of recent history, recent memory, the turnovers are going to be important. And, that's always the case. But there is evidence that maybe more so when these two teams get on the same field. And I tend to think when you do still have, I know it's a 10-point line, but fairly, I would say, similar teams in terms of actual talent. When that happens in an early season situation where things are still sloppy, Kentucky will make their share of mistakes as well. It's still week 2 for them as well. Who has less mistakes, or who can force those mistakes, would be the other way to say it, will have a chance to win.
Yes. Turnovers, field position, big explosive plays. So actually those will be, I think I will make those my keys, Wes. Can you, if you're South Carolina, make some explosive plays to score a big passing play to put yourself in a good spot? I don't know if South Carolina's offense can just go up and down the field and you look back at this game and say, wow, they had 4 75-yard drives. I'd be actually very surprised, and it would be a pleasant surprise for everybody in Columbia if that happened. So I think you're going to have to make some explosive plays. And conversely, because again, I do feel like South Carolina's defense against Kentucky's offense, for now, advantage South Carolina's defense, you got to stay away from explosive plays. You can't let Barry and Brown take a jet sweep 60 yards. You can't let Dane Key catch a 50-yard post on you. You know, that's what you have to stay. When you have an opportunity to get Brock Vandegrift, get him down. Don't let him scramble out. Hit somebody downfield on a scramble drill. Turnovers as well. You laid it out. Nick laid it out. In a game where you feel like points are going to be at a premium, which I think will be in this game, you have to win the turnover battle, I think, to win.
All right, who's winning, Chris?
Are we giving score predictions now?
Let's do it.
All right, my score prediction, I have 20-17 Kentucky in this game. Sorry. Ready to hear about it in the comments? That's what I'm going with. That's how I feel right now, Wes.
I respect it. I got I already got asked. I need to start writing these things down so that I'm consistent.
I'll definitely forget mine.
I don't remember if I said 23-20 or 24-20 or 24-21. So
oh, you sent it. You mean your picks you sent in?
No, I already got asked on another show.
Oh, I got
So I'm trying to keep it consistent.
Got to keep some consistency. Yeah.
I have Kentucky winning as well. I think I said 23-20, maybe 24-21, somewhere in there. I think it'll be closer than that 10-point line.
Yep.
I really do. But by the way, shout out to Andrew. Great to meet you as well, man. Bumped into several of you walking around before the game and in the game this past week. So always good to meet some of our Gamecock Central readers, subscribers, viewers here on GC Live as well. As always, if you see us, come say what's up. But I think somebody just said it pretty well. It was Andrew. I need to see more.
Yep.
In no way am I saying South Carolina can't go win. Would not be surprised at all, honestly. I think they have talent. I really do. Like, this is not a team devoid of talent. But I also am trying to do better also about who would I pick if I would just literally, if I was not covering South Carolina, if I was just looking from the outside, which team showed us more in week one?
Yeah.
The answer is Kentucky.
Yes.
Doesn't mean Kentucky will win, but Carolina's going to have to take a big step forward. I hope we're talking about Lenora Sellers on Sunday. If we're talking about Lenora Sellers as the star of the game, it completely flips what we're talking about. It completely flips who we're talking about having won the game, in my opinion. I don't know if that's fair to expect that yet, based on what we saw Saturday. But at some point, it will click in for Sellers, and the entire ceiling of this team and the floor of this team will be raised. It's just a matter of when will that happen. So if you're Carolina, you desperately hope it happens right off the bat this week in Lexington, Kentucky. So, all right, Chris, that's all I got. You got anything else, man? Final closing thoughts?
No closing thoughts.
All right, shout out to everybody that's joined us throughout the week. Shout out to all of our guests. Nick, appreciate him hopping on, and appreciate the support as always. He is Chris. I'm Wes. Come check us out, GamecockCentral.com. Even though this is the last show of the week, we'll have complete continued coverage at GamecockCentral.com. Use the code SCAR1, SCAR1, to get 2 months for $1 on Gamecock Central if you're not a subscriber yet. If you're not, what are you doing? What are you waiting on? Come hang out with us. Great crew. Jack will be in Kentucky bringing you complete coverage from the game as well. Chris and I will be back here on GC Live Monday, new time on Mondays, 9 a.m. Monday, 9 a.m. we'll be on here talking about whatever we saw on that past Saturday. So until then, y'all have a good one, and we'll see